from Whitefish Bay, and her father is from Wabigoon Lake. Karen has a PhD in education and is a professor at the Faculty of Education at the University of Manitoba. She lives in Winnipeg with her wife and two children. So, with that, Karen, I will give you the floor.
My spirit name is Forever in Daylight, which I always say is an ironic name because I'm so negative and I need to rise up to it, try to be a positive person about stuff. And sometimes I can do it. So that's a winning day when I can do that. I live in Winnipeg. I've lived here since I was about 4. We used to live in Kenora and Thunder Bay, and we're the only ones here in Manitoba. The rest of my family is still in Ontario, either in Whitefish Bay or the Dryden area. Some of them are on the reserve. My father is on the reserve, Wabigoon Lake, where he used to be the chief 100 years ago. Maybe it was 150, I'm not sure, but it was a long time ago. So of course I grew up in the 70s, and it was a really different world back then. I mean, it's hard even for me to imagine what the world was like in those days, but I knew I was gay when I was about 5 or 6. I think it was like grade 2 or something like that. I just didn't know what it was. Like, this was just something that nobody talked about, right? So I didn't know there was such a thing, but I knew that I was different for sure from my friends. But I grew up in St. Boniface. For those of you who know Winnipeg, St. Boniface is French Roman Catholic, really old fashioned, like they made us take catechism in school and stuff like that till my dad found out, and he was still drinking and he came down to the school, and then we didn't have to take it anymore. We went to the library during catechism. But so it was really a religious place. You were either a Catholic or you were something else. So it was really homophobic. I mean, the society was anyways, but the kids in those schools, I remember there was a kid who I think now probably was gay, but everybody thought he was gay. This was about grade 5. And he had this friend named Victor, and they like pressed their heads together and made them kiss, and stuff like this would go on in the classroom. It was just stuff that would be unheard of now, or there'd certainly be inquiries and firings, and you know what I mean? But in those days, things like that were common. Just awful things. Of course, I had crushes on women. So when I was in high school, then I thought, okay, well, so this is a gay thing. So what are you gonna do about that? And I didn't know what I wanted to do about that. I mean, in those days, you could still get beaten up. There people were getting killed. Still, and when I say beaten up, sometimes like really beaten up, like not just a bleeding nose or anything like that. So, I mean, I never thought of coming out. It didn't occur to me in those days. I just didn't think it was something I would ever do. And then when I had a marriage proposal at 19 from a guy who was my friend's boyfriend and he wanted to stay in the country, I actually seriously considered it. I thought, yeah, I'll just marry this guy when I'm 19 and we'll get divorced right away. And then I'll say, oh yeah, I got married really young, and that'd be my story, right? How I could be a lesbian, you know what I mean? Because I married this guy. And so then I could just be this, what do you call it, old maid straight person instead of being gay. I think one of the reasons I was so averse to being gay, or to coming out, not to being gay, I was never averse to that, but to coming out, was that my family was extremely homophobic also. So you would hear them openly say like horrific things that happened to gays, and isn't that funny and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, I don't know, this is not a safe place for me to at this time to come out and stuff like that. And so it went on like that for years and years. And I think I was about 24 or 23 when I decided to just give up entirely, and I stopped even going out with men. Like I just stopped going out with anybody, and I just thought, well, I'm just going to live the rest of my life by myself and stuff like that. So then I went to Taiwan to teach English, and one of the most important thing that happened when I was in Taiwan is I fell in love with a woman. So I'd been in love, I suppose, like I'd had crushes on women, of course, but I'd never had feelings reciprocated. That was new for me at 31. I was 31 then. And so of course, everything went to hell and ended badly, very dramatically, and in a flash of fire at the end. And so I came home and I thought, well, I don't think I want to live this way anymore. This pretending I'm straight or pretending that I don't care about men or women or anything. And then that's when I came out. I was 30, 31, 32 when I came out to my mother. 2 hours coming out to my mother and dating women and all this stuff was just amazing. Just like I felt like I was alive then, finally, for the first time. And then everything started going well. I'm a professional student. For those of you who aspire to 5 degrees, I went to school a really long time, and I did a lot of failing. I failed all the courses at the end of my BA. I failed all the courses at the end of my Bachelor of Music, and I didn't start succeeding at school until I got ducks in a row. Quit drinking is another thing I did. I quit drinking. That really turned things around for me. But I think all of that happened because I started being who I was. It's ridiculous that I spent all those years like that. And so all of a sudden I started succeeding. So I got my B.Ed then, and then master's, and the PhD, of course, went everything. I just started doing better. And then I met my wife, who has changed everything. I didn't know that. Oh no. I didn't know I was capable of it. Let's just say that. And so here we are, and we've been together for, oh my goodness, 12 years. The kids were 4 and 7 when I met them. Now the girl is 19 and my son is 16. So it's been a long time. And then I got this job as a professor. So you would look at my life and think, oh my God, look at this successful woman who's done. No, that's not how it went at all. I may look successful now, but there is a hell of a lot of failures along that path, that I was on. And the biggest change I ever went through in my life was coming out, for sure. And the only regret I have about coming out is that I didn't do it sooner. Although I'll say I probably wasn't ready when I was younger. It was a different world too. I was different. I'll tell you a story about coming out to my mother. I was just back from Taiwan. I was living at her place for a couple of months. I got a job. I was just waiting for my first paycheck. And so I was telling her this story because I had gone out with this woman, the first woman I went out with actually. And I said, yeah, Jen and I'm going to move in with Jen. I mean, it was platonically. We hadn't gone out in months. You know what I mean? I said, she's got a room. And so I'm going to go and live over there. And she went bananas. I was so surprised by that. I mean, I'd already come out to her like 2 years before or something. No, it must have been, I guess it was a year before, but still. And she said, well, you can pack up all your stuff and get out. I'm like, well, okay, well, I'm 32. That's not quite the threat it would be at 18. But anyways, so I did. I called her bluff. I packed up all my stuff. I told Jen, I'm not getting paid for 2 weeks. She said, doesn't matter, just come. And I moved out. Of my mom's house, even though I'd only been staying there for a couple of months. But as I was packing it up, she's like, oh, no, you don't have to go tonight. I'm like, oh, no, you've made it clear, that you don't want me here and stuff like that. And I just, this same woman, when I was getting married years and years later, she was so excited about the wedding. She was so excited about my wife. They're both nurses. That's a big plus for her. Once she found out my wife was just like, oh, well, hang on. Anyways, but had that happened when I was 18 years old with no money and no education and no job and no place to stay, it would have been catastrophic. I thought about that often after she threw me out like that. Like the things that we go through and why. If people knew us, me and my wife and the kids, we're so boring, It's so, I don't know what they're afraid of. It's just, we live in Transcona, for Christ's sake. If you ever come to Winnipeg, you go and find the place that's furthest away from civilization. You can't get any further. The next road over is the perimeter highway. You know what I mean? Deacon's Corner. I mean, it's just so regular what we are, And I sure kick my ass sometimes when I think, well, maybe I should have come out sooner. But I mean, my feeling is that everything happens in its time, when things are supposed to happen. For example, I have a friend who I've known since grade 2, and she got pregnant. She thought she was in menopause. She got pregnant when she was 42. And that's the age I was when I was with Julie and these kids. And I went to see her in Toronto, and I said, what the hell are we doing with these kids? What the hell do we know about raising children, for God's sake? I wouldn't even stay in the room when they're changing diapers, you know, I'd be out of there. But anyways, so my friend said, well, you know, we already lived our lives. We went to school. We went and did all that traveling we wanted to do, and now it's our time to be mommies. I'm like, oh God. I'll tell you a short story about that. I was at my wife's, well, we weren't married then, we were dating maybe a month or two, and she went into the kitchen and she came out, she looked like she saw a ghost. I said, what's the matter? Did you see a mouse in there or something? And she said, I have to work tonight. She was a nurse, she works shifts. And I said, oh, I lived close by, maybe 5 minutes away. I said, oh, well, that's no problem. I'll just go home and take off my contacts, and I'll come back with my glasses, and I'll watch the kids like they're sleeping, right? Like what could happen? I figured. Anyway, so she said, oh, would you really? Would you be okay with that? I'm like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. So I go home and I phone my mother, can you come over? Because I don't think I can be alone with these kids. Oh my God, when I think about the difference between who that person was and who I am, my God. There are differences, I would say, to coming out super later, like living this life later. And that's the differences I have between younger people and myself. For example, I have a friend who would characterize herself, probably would say him. You know what I mean? Him and his and he. And I ran into them. That's what they say. They were at a powwow and I was at a powwow, and so I said, oh, you want to meet this is my wife, Julie. And they said, partner. You know what I mean? Like correcting my speech. But I don't know what I think about that, because she calls herself a wife and I call her my wife. I don't know. So for there's some differences in generations there between what I would think of as my wife and what other people would think of as my partner. But I really don't think that those are huge differences that need to divide us. I think anybody who spent any time in the gay community knows about divisions already, you know, between gays and straights and gays and lesbians, God forbid. If you ever come to Pride here, some of the things that we have are good events. And one of them was the baseball tournament. So seeing, I mean, nobody wanted to go against the lesbians, that's for sure. You know what I mean? It was good. It was good fun. We haven't had it, of course, since the COVID, but anyways, so it looks as though my life has taken a trajectory that was planned, and that everything is, you know, where I want to be and stuff, which it is, but that's not the route that I took to get to this place. And it was a lot of awful stuff that happened. And some things, one of the things I think that young people could keep in mind is that the freedoms that we have now sure as hell didn't exist not that long ago. And a lot of those freedoms were paid for in blood, you know? And I think sometimes that we can maybe think of the people who went before us and made those things possible for us. Anyway, that's all I have to say. And if there are any questions, I guess we'll do questions right away, Tiffany, huh?
Yeah, we can do questions for you, Karen. Thank you, Miigwech. Very much appreciated your stories and your sharing. So at this time, I'll just open up for anyone. If anyone has any questions for Karen. Yeah.
Karen, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story. I have two questions as I heard you were talking. The first one would be, how do you be a safe guardian to the younger youth? So I do work with youth in the LGBT community, and so like I was just wondering, how do we become a safe place for them to come out and stuff, because you talked about your struggle about coming out, and just talking about the ages of 18, like you came out as 32, you talked about the barriers. And I do remember coming out as transgender to my mom at, I think it was 18 or 19. And I had no, and she disowned me at that time. And so, like, I'm glad that an elder like you has an understanding that 18, you don't have a job or education or a place to go at being tossed out. And the second question was, you talked about the divisions in the LGBT community. So I was just wondering what divisions or examples of divisions has caused you some barriers in your life.
The thing I'd say about being a safe guardian to youth, where I am anyway at the university, is that those people who are out seem to be really strong about it. Like, they seem to be okay about it. I don't know if they are, but they don't seem to be. Of course, I'm teaching the most privileged people in society at this moment, because I'm a university professor. So if I have a class of 35, I might have 2 natives in there, and the rest of them are immigrants or Caucasian. So it's just a different situation. Now, my last job, where I was 11 years at Red River College, would be different. I was teaching all natives. So in those places, we had allies anyways, allyship. People knew about it, and if they wanted to come to us and talk with us, and some of the students did come and talk to me about those things, because some of us are in a bit of a more vulnerable position than those who come from the top 95% of their earning income, like the people I'm teaching now, completely different. But for sure, I come out right away in class. I never was like that before. I would never have been like that if I were 20, but I come out right away. I don't make it a thing. You know what I mean? I just say it like my name is. And I think that makes it better for the students. I'll tell you a study I read one time. They were looking at homeless youth, and they were figuring that most of those homeless youth were because they didn't get along with their parents, or their parents threw them out, like a sort of a freedom thing, you know? And what they found with most of those students, it was because some kind of sexual assault had happened at home. And that's why they're homeless. You know what I mean? And I think for the LGBT too, you know, a lot of people might end up in places that they wouldn't have otherwise been if they hadn't had this discussion with the parents. I'm not even sure to this day what if my family still has issues. I'm pretty sure they do, because we used to get invited out a lot, like back home, you know, but I never do now because of, I don't know if it's because my spouse is a woman, or if it's because she's white. Frankly, I'm not sure. I'm not sure which is the bigger issue there. I know for my dad, the bigger issue is that she's white. I think that's generational issue. You know, I hope to God that those things are not as big an issue as they were when I was growing up. The divisions in the LGBT community is basically what I meant there. Is that I used to sing in a choir, for example, a gay choir, and the men would always say that the women were trying to control everything, and the women would say that the men were trying to control everything because of patriarchy and all this stuff. That's the main division I saw between men and women, or between lesbians and gays. I haven't been involved in the community as big as I used to be. Like 20 years ago, I was very involved in aspects anyways of the gay community. So I hope to God that's gotten better. I mean, come on, you know, it's 2021. Some of these people were back in 1974, never found their way out. You know what I mean? But I would guess that young people are just fine. Not perfect, but that things are a lot better than they were when I was young. That's for sure. I hope so.
Perfect. Thanks, Ray, for the questions. And Karen, thank you for the answers.
Yep.
Any more questions before we move on to our next speaker?
Caitlin?
Yes, thank you, Karen, for sharing your story and all of your experience with us. I really appreciate it. I also work at the Dryden Native Friendship Center here with Tiffany, and I found working in smaller communities and trying to do outreach for queer youth is really difficult because there are still so many barriers for people coming out. So they might not even feel comfortable seeking out the resources that we do have. So what would your advice be to reach that part of the population who won't necessarily come to us, but we need to find a way to reach them?
I would think there'd be lots you could do, especially with young people with social media, not to publicize them, but that they have a safe place. A non-digital form of this, when I was young, my friend, I think he was only about 17, and he started a social group like that, where people would come out and they would go there. They wouldn't tell their parents or anything like that. And a lot of schools here are doing sort of things. Maybe they'll have a class, and in the classroom, you're called by something other than your name, or maybe something other than your gender, than your assigned gender. And they don't tell the parents that. So I don't know if you would ever have a thing like that where the parents wouldn't know, especially in a small place, but I bet there's some kind of support that you could do online that they could stay anonymous, and it wouldn't be the same maybe as being in person. But then again, a lot of people do things digitally now. I don't know. That's a suggestion I would have, is to go digital and try to do. I don't know. There are a lot of conservative people in my family, for sure, and I'm sure they're everywhere in those communities. So that's about all I could suggest there. If that's helpful.
No, it is. Yeah, because and we're having to do a lot of things digitally anyway because of the pandemic. So
Right.
It makes that much more sense.
The pandemic is changing things.
Yeah, big time. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. If there isn't any more questions, I will move on to our next speaker. Okay, so our next speaker is Albert McLeod. So Albert McLeod is a status Indian with the ancestry from Nisichawayasik. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Cree Nation and the Métis community at Norway House in northern Manitoba. He has over 30 years of experience as a human rights activist and is one of the directors of the Two-Spirited People of Manitoba. Albert began his Two-Spirit advocacy in Winnipeg in 1986 and became an HIV/AIDS activist in 1987. He was the director of the Manitoba Aboriginal AIDS Task Force from 1991 to 2001. In 2008, Albert received an honorary doctorate of law from the University of Winnipeg. Albert lives in Winnipeg, where he works as a consultant specializing in Indigenous people, cultural reclamation, and cross-cultural training. So I will give the floor to Albert.
Thank you, and thank you, Karen, for your presentation. I grew up in the Pas, northern Manitoba, and I remember as a youth, we used to go to Sunday school at the Salvation Army. And I was fascinated with the minister there, or pastor. He had these little felt, people telling Bible stories, and I was just fascinated with them, and I wanted them, and that's why I went to Sunday school. It wasn't so much for the Christianity; it was I wanted those felt little things to play with myself. Anyway, I've got a slide presentation, and as Karen talked about, where are things today in 2021? So my presentation has some of that information for everybody on this call today. So I'm going to go into my Zoom thing here, or share screen, and go into my slideshow. I do a lot of Zoom events of interest to myself, and I do one called Two-Spirit People Go to Hollywood. If anybody's interested in that, let me know and I'll hook you up to the next one. So I call this session Two-Spirit Resurgence in the 21st Century. And this is the Two-Spirit People of Manitoba's new logo, which is really kind of representative of the Indigenous identity with that of the broader LGBTQ plus community. Can you see the slides? Tiffany?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, I'm good. Great. So working in Manitoba, the southern Indigenous group that's most prominent are the Ojibwe people. And luckily for me, I was able to hook up with Roger Roulette, who's an Ojibwe language specialist. And we worked together to authenticate and particularly Ojibwe values, beliefs, and philosophies that are embedded in the language as a way to address kind of the pan-Indigenous knowledge that's people sort of are using today in Canada and the US. And Roger says that the Ojibwe, the positioning of the human is in relationship to the natural world in that, we know there are animals, animate beings like animals and plants. And that, so humans have a place in that world and there isn't a hierarchy. So essentially, human beings are animate beings. And yes, we do have socially constructed genders and sexuality and all of that. But essentially, we are spiritual entities that have come alive on this physical journey. So the term awe is an Ojibwe word, which literally means he/she or something animate or being. An animate being is who he/she is supposed to be. So this implies for the Ojibwe worldview that our presence as Indigenous LGBTQ plus people is intentional as a part of the natural world. And that's very different on how colonial people see, LGBTQ plus people as kind of an aberration, moving away from the sort of binary sanctioned male and female roles in colonial societies. But in pre-contact, Indigenous peoples of the Americas were inclusive and did not discriminate based on gender identity or sexual attraction. As well, in the Korean Ojibwe languages, they don't use the pronouns he and she as we do in contemporary North American society. Uh, So that is something, but he said the proximates that are used, which are understood to be either he/she or something alive. So we really, when we engage with each other, and I know socially constructed in the 21st century in a colonial society, that there's all these kind of markers that we're supposed to achieve, like rites of passage when you're 16, and you come out as straight or gay or trans. And in reality, from the Indigenous point of view, that might not happen till you're 25, right? And for some people, it may never happen, and it doesn't need to happen, right? That is a living human being, you essentially have all the rights as any other people because you're human. And these are inalienable and inherent rights. And they're linked to our land, right, to the natural world. So it's a very different point of view than what Canadian colonial society has, established here over the last 400 years. So the Indigenous cultural imperative around this idea is that every child has a purpose, a role, a destiny, and possesses a divine gift. This philosophy applies to LGBTQI two-spirit people who also come from the spiritual world. To negatively interfere with the life journey of two-spirit people is a social and cultural taboo among Indigenous peoples around the world. So as you know, in the 1400s, 1500s, your Christians went out and colonized a lot of Indigenous nations and really imposed that binary, heteronormative, patriarchal idea onto these traditional communities using violence. We can't forget, as Karen mentioned, that this journey has been paid for in blood. So when we think about the pre-contact structure of community and family, it was inclusive and the gender diverse the expression of life. It wasn't unique. It wasn't something new. It was known for tens of thousands of years. And so with the two-spirit, we are kind of around that essence of life creation. So we're kind of like unicorns who carry magic, and we have all these amazing gifts that other people do not have. And we look up to the sky, the world of astrology, to interpret the power of creation from animals to plants and humans, and just that beauty and that energy that comes from our existence in this physical world. Now, this one is kind of the struggles that many of our youth face, is trying to find an identity in this imposed binary gender identity and world of heterosexism that we live in. And realize that, these sort of artificially constructed social roles around this ultra male and ultra female idealized, through the church and through patriarchy, is that we're searching, right? But I think we're now in a period of decolonization and reconciliation where we are telling others, well, there was an attempt to erase our identities over the last 200 years, but it didn't work, right? We've had an apology for the Indian residential schools and the damage that was done. And part of that was to erase who we were, to nullify our existence and to make us conform to fit into either one of these, sort of artificial identities. Now, the resurgence began in the late 70s with the founding of Gay American Indians in San Francisco by Randy Burns and Barbara Cameron, the late Barbara Cameron, who kind of, caught onto this idea and said, there's nothing wrong with me. It's like, I'm interesting, I'm special, I have gifts, right? So they were kind of the first ones to break through that. They did that in the larger LGBTQ community, right? Who were kind of our allies at that time. Now, in terms of the reconciliation or the decolonization process, the Liberal government did apologize to LGBTQ Canadians for that history of homophobia and racism, not homophobia, and transphobia, also for Indigenous people, racism. And in the apology in November 28, 2017, Canada essentially said they apologized for suppressing Two-Spirit Indigenous values and beliefs. They are sorry, right? So it really is a recognition that what happened was wrong, right? Our erasure was wrong. Moving forward, in 2017, the Liberal government established the LGBTQ2 Secretariat, and it was really to prepare all the other federal departments to begin an engagement process for LGBTQ2 Canadians to build our capacity, right, to really catch up on terms of all the things that we had missed in the era of suppression and discrimination. So a fund was established about 2 years ago, and more recently, in October last year, they announced that $15 million in funding was actually given for 76 LGBTQ2 community-led projects across Canada. And it was under the Department of Women and Gender Equality. And these are the national non-governmental organizations that are LGBTQ2 plus, Two-Spirit in Motion Society, which is the first national network of Two-Spirit people, Centre Interligne in Quebec, Egal Canada Human Rights Trust, Fiat Canada Pride, Foundation Emergence in Quebec, Rainbow Refugee Society, and then the Enchanté Network. And the Enchanté Network is the LGBTQ2 plus centers of Canada. And there's about, I think, 200 centers in Canada. And the Enchanté name really is, I am enchanted to meet you, right? So it's kind of this coming from a place of confidence, a place of power, and a place of respect, right? That we are enchanted with the other. In terms of the other 4 Indigenous projects that were funded in Canada is our organization in Winnipeg, the Two-Spirited People of Manitoba, Four Feathers Society in BC, Edmonton Two-Spirit Society. And actually, Edmonton Two-Spirit Society is hosting the 34th Annual International Two-Spirit Gathering in Alberta in August, hopefully, considering the COVID restrictions. And then the Wabanaki Two-Spirit Alliance in Eastern Canada. Also, this is We've also done some work in preserving our history. And so there's a Two-Spirit collection at the University of Winnipeg Archives that is available online, as well as the Two-Spirit papers at the University of Minnesota. So just in closing, as we decolonize and reconcile and indigenize, that, to realize, we come from a history of tens of thousands of years, and that colonization can be interpreted as being a sort of an interruption. And now we're picking up that thread, right? We're indigenizing our lives, right? With what the legacy of our ancestors left us. And they left us a lot. It may not look like it, but they left us a lot. So this is one of the teachings that Roger left with me. The strength of a culture is not defined by what it can repel, but by what it can absorb. So we are absorbing that experience of colonization and then, continuing our journey, right, where we left off. So I'll stop share, and that's my presentation.
Albert, thank you very much, Miigwech. So now I will open up the floor if anyone has any questions for Albert before we move on to our next presenter.
That's you had a really nice presentation, and I've actually I like to read things like that about what the people are saying about it. So I really liked it. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Anything else? Okay, so our next presenter is Crystal Medicine. So Crystal Medicine, she resides in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Crystal is originally from Treaty Number 3 territory, Manitou Rapids First Nations, Ontario. She is the mother of 14-year-old twin daughters and identifies as Two-Spirit/lesbian. Crystal, it's all yours. Crystal, are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I didn't realize that I muted it. Thank you, Albert and Karen, for sharing, and thank you, Tiffany. Like Tiffany said, I grew up in Brandon, Manitoba, and in Fort Frances, Ontario. I really don't even know how to start this off. I guess I'll start off from when I was younger. I guess growing up, like I always knew there was something different about me, and I didn't know really, like, I didn't grow up with anybody that was like openly part of the LGBTQ community. So like I grew up with a lot of like confusion, and I didn't really have like anything to match the way that I felt like around me. So I was like I was confused basically. Sorry, I got a cold, so my voice is all scratchy. So growing up, I wasn't really exposed to anybody that was like gay, I guess, and I didn't really even know anything about like what gay people were or anything like that. I just knew that something with me was different. It wasn't until I was like a teenager that I had finally met somebody at a party, and it was kind of like a sleepover, and there was a girl there, and she dressed how would you say that, masculine, and like she dressed like a boy, and she was dating one of the girls at the party, and I thought like, holy crap, like, you know, like that's so cool. And I thought like I could identify with her a bit, like on the girls, like she was dating a girl, so I could identify with that. And So I just thought, like, you know, like maybe this is who I am. So I started kind of mirroring the way that she acted and the way that she dressed. So I started dressing in like boys' clothes and wearing the hats, the backward hats, and baggy pants and whatnot. And then I became like close friends with her for a bit, but her parents had sent her away because I guess they considered what she was doing bad behavior. So she got sent away. And yeah, that was it for me. I had nobody else to relate with after that. What else can I share? From then on, like I was, like I knew like that I had liked girls, but it was just still hard for me to accept it. And then being around like my family and my friends, and like there was a lot of like homophobic people in my family, and there was a lot of homophobic people within my friend circle. So it was like really hard for me to try and even grasp that like I was gay. Sorry, I'm really nervous for some reason. I guess I'll just move on to my teen years. Eventually, I ended up meeting up with like a group full of different people. Like there was women that were dating women, and then men that were dating men, and then dating both sexes. So I started kind of like trying to insert myself into that crowd, because I felt like, okay, you know, like I see myself in them, so maybe this is what I need to do. And that's exactly what I did. I started making friends with people there and hanging around with them, going to bars and stuff. And eventually, like I came out to them in that circle, but I wasn't out to like any of my close friends or my close family. So I was basically living like a double life in some sense. While I was in that circle of friends, I had met a woman. She became really close friends with me, and eventually like she like pursued me. And that was kind of it was kind of a scary thing for me, like to actually, I guess, admit that I was also attracted to this person. So I kind of like I guess just suppressed whatever I felt for her and just like ignored her and whatnot. And eventually my curiosity got the best of me, and I ended up dating her. And she was the first woman that I dated when I was 18 years old. And then from then on, it was just like everything just started flowing. I was like, whatever, this is who I am. I'm gonna be this person, and I don't care what anybody thinks, kind of thing, eh? But that's what I felt inside my mind. That's not exactly what happened on the outside. I still hid from my family and my friends just because there was so much like negativity when it came to like even discussing like LGBTQ people. Anytime the conversation came up, like there was a lot of like remarks that were made, and you know, like it hurt me, but then I'd be like right involved in there and trying to pretend that, you know, that I wasn't part of that group of people and whatnot. But yeah, she was my first experience at 18. Then I think I was probably 20, 21 when I decided to come out to my friends. I had made a new group of friends, and I had lived in Saskatchewan, and it wasn't a very good experience in the beginning. I I'd lost some friendships, and it was probably best that way that I lost some friendships, but then I also built like a lot of stronger friendships and supports, because when I came out, it was just almost like that kind of made it okay for other people in my group of friends to come out. So like I was already among, gay people, and I didn't even know it. And so yeah, like I was given support, and I supported other people that were in my group of friends. Coming out to my family, that was really tough, but I eventually did that when I was probably 24 years old. And I was already in a relationship with a woman for 3 years. And I was basically given like a choice, either, you tell your family or else this is it, kind of thing, So that's what I did. I went to my family and told them everything. I was with a woman, and that this is the way it was going to be, and that there was nothing that they could say that was going to change that. It didn't turn out very good. I was met with a lot of resistance, and like I was shamed by a few family members. My siblings, they were all upset, and coming out to my mom, like she was really upset. And now my mom, she's one of my biggest supporters. I just love my mom. Comes with me to the pride parades and does everything like that with us. And but before, in the beginning, she like felt a lot of like I guess anger, and she blamed herself and thought, like maybe there's something that I did wrong. But like I just assured her that, this is just who I am, and I've been this way since I was like a kid. And sorry about that. And at the time too, she was going through a lot with not only me, my brother came out as transgender. So like she was dealing with her oldest baby and then her youngest baby coming out to her at the same time. And I didn't plan it that way. Like I didn't plan it to come out and then all of a sudden, my brother coming out as transgendered, but it just happened like that. And we lived in different cities and stuff. So it was pretty hard on her. And then she was dealing with my brothers and sister, and like them having like a negative outlook on it. So she was dealing with a lot, but eventually, after I guess fighting it for a few years, she came around, and she just decided it was like easier to love and support us rather than like resist it and try to change something she couldn't change. But yeah, that's how it went with my mother. My dad was just always like, okay, like you do what you need to do, and just, leave me out of it, kind of thing. So that's basically how it is with him. He just accepts it, and just don't bring me anybody home that's crazy, kind of thing. But yeah, that's now, I guess. I'm 41 years old. I'm a lesbian, yay. I've been out since I was 21. So I've been through all of that craziness, and I've lived with women, and yeah, that's about it. And well, I'm a proud mother of twins, like Tiffany said. My children are 14 years old. Avery identifies as non-binary, bisexual, and Tally identifies as bisexual. And that is my family. And that's my story. Thank you.
Crystal, thank you. Thank you very much. Miigwech, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Cheryl? Or for Cheryl? For Crystal, sorry. No.
I do.
Oh,
Hi, Crystal. Miigwech for sharing your story and your life experience. I couldn't help wondering while you were talking, though, you were mentioning a lot that you didn't really have any queer role models or supports when you were younger. So it was really difficult for you to come out because there was no one who to sort of support you along that process. So now, though, as an adult who has come out and is living their life the way they want to, what advice would you give to someone who was in a similar position that you were once? Like, or I guess, what advice would you give to your younger self now that you know more?
I guess just to seek out the resources in like your city. Like I know out here, like when I can't always help my daughter with like what she's feeling, I have her involved in the Gay Straight Alliance group, and I also have her involved in the Rainbow Resource Center. So
Awesome. Thank you.
yeah.
anything else from anyone? Okay. We can move on to our next speaker. My next speaker is Levi Foy. Manadu Gwiwi Zens, aka Levi Foy. Pronouns he, him, she, her, they, them. Also known after dark as Dragstar Prairie Sky from Treaty 3 territory, now residing in Treaty 1 territory, also known as Winnipeg, Manitoba. Levi speaks to their experiences as a two-spirit person in an urban disconnected space while holding queer and Indigenous community building and support as essential to resilience. So Levi, it is all yours.
Hi, everyone. Miigwech to Crystal and Karen and Albert for sharing your stories and for being so personal about it. It was so, listening to Karen just open up and you just kind of went right into it. I was like, oh, great. So this is what I'm doing this afternoon. I can do this. Full disclosure, I didn't write that biography. Somebody else did for this podcast interview I did. And I was like, oh, I really like how good they made me sound. So that's, I didn't write that bio, but it's true. That's who I am. My father's family comes from Couchiching First Nation, which is located just 2 hours-ish south of Dryden. And then my mother's family comes from rural Saskatchewan, and my father and my mother met in Brandon and that area. So we were actually raised in Brandon in southwestern Manitoba. And I would spend summers at 5 Mile Dock Road in Couchiching, and that's kind of where I lived. And that's so Couchiching and the whole Treaty 3 region has always had like a fantastic positive connotation for me, and I understand that that's not everyone's experiences, and so I just want to be very clear about that I lived that I was really fortunate to have that kind of relationship with my home territory, and that was very special. However, growing up in southwestern Manitoba, I didn't have that kind of safety and security, and so having a place like Cooch or Fort or the 5 Mile or whatever we called it, that was really special because people took care of me there. But in Manitoba, I didn't have that. It was very violent. It was a pretty gross place to be different of any kind. So that's that. Currently, I do many things. I'm currently the executive director of a small nonprofit organization in Winnipeg. I've been doing this for almost 3 years now. And then prior to that, I worked in a lot of different sectors, mostly primarily working these last 10 years with people who have experienced homelessness and have lots of different substance use stuff and lots of different other things happening in their personal lives. Kind of got into this because I moved back home when I was an adult, and after I was done my master's degree, I moved back home from Toronto. I was kind of flailing there. I just got my master's, and that actually wasn't super helpful. I had plans to return to Latin America, but that always fell through. My grandpa got real sick, and so I went home, and I ended up working at Wichita Child and Family Services for 2 years. And the next speaker, their grandfather was extremely influential in how I've been able to approach and kind of grow as an adult, and really help ground me in a lot of really sacred, important teachings. So I owe a lot to who I am to George Simard and a lot of the folks that I met at my 2 years at Wichita. And then while I was there back home, there's not a lot to do, especially if you work for Child and Family Services. If you go out and you go and do a thing, people will tell on you. So we had to be kind of, if we wanted to go out and party and do the things that we wanted to do, we would go to Winnipeg, or we'd go to Thunder Bay, or we'd go to Minneapolis. And that's just kind of how it was. So then I really delved into drag, and drag became my outlet. And I also used drag as to really navigate my own identity, to navigate like who I was. And it really helped me sort out a lot of things that I had internalized. Karen had mentioned at the very beginning that back in the day, and still even today, there was a lot of disconnect between femme people, women and men, and there was a lot of disconnect and fractures within the queer community. So I came out in the early 2000s. I'm almost 40 now. And when I came out, I didn't feel like I had a place in the queer community. So there was just a bunch of us younger gay natives, and we would go to the gay bar and we would just kind of hang out, and then that was it. And then we would often just end up going to like a native bar later on at night. And that was it. So I wasn't super involved in the way that I'm involved today. I moved. When I was done my undergrad, I ended up moving to Mexico, and I lived in this region in Mexico where where indigeneity, being indigenous and being queer held very special social capital or social power in that region. And I learned so much about what community organizing can look like, and particularly about how you can reclaim space and how you can use negative experiences and really turn them into positive experiences. And so many of the Mushes or Indigenous trans people who kind of held that space and who kind of took me in under their wing taught me so many things about taking care of one another, and how to really assert yourself even in really difficult situations. And then they also really taught me a lot about like makeup and being nice and being presentable and all those kinds of things. I don't want to say they taught me those things entirely, because I did have those things growing up, but what they taught me is they taught me to have confidence and be able to accept who I am and the community that I come from, and our role in and the importance that we have as individuals in taking care of ourselves. And so when I returned home and when I moved, I had a lot of sorting out to do, a lot of misogyny I needed to sort through, a lot of internalized homophobia, a lot of things that I really needed to do. And going home in the early 2010s was a perfect opportunity for me to do that. And so I was able to do that in the relative safety and security that I had always felt in Couchichang or Fort Francis or that region, because of my loving and supporting family and the community that I was just able to. It's different when you go back as an adult, because your voice is a little bit stronger and you know how to use it and you can defend yourself a little bit better. And so that was always really, really good for me. So then I got this opportunity to work in Winnipeg. I had quit. My grandpa had passed away. I'd spent another year back home, and then I was like, well, I want to try something new. I'm comfortable with myself. What am I going to do? So I was like, I'm not going back to Toronto, because I didn't like Toronto at all. Maybe I'll go to Vancouver, or maybe I'll go to Edmonton, or maybe I'll go back to Winnipeg, because Winnipeg has always been kind of a safe place. And so I got this opportunity to work for Sunshine House on this research project, and we did. And then from there, we realized that there was a lot of queer people a lot of queer Indigenous people, a lot of queer racialized people, and a lot of queer people who use drugs or participated in activities that kind of, at that time, they didn't really have a space that they could just hang out and be themselves. And so a bunch of us got together and we started this program here at the Sunshine House called Like That. And that was primarily for older adults to kind of just hang out. It wasn't a bar and it wasn't a clinical space, and it was just a place where people could converge. And from there, that's where I really got to make a lot of strong connections within the community, because community members started coming around. I got a real personal and intimate understanding about how the interconnectedness of so many people, and an understanding of like the unspoken kind of sacred bonds that existed and continue to exist, particularly among a lot of Indigenous queer people. So Albert, who spoke earlier, had a really strong influence and continues to have a really strong role in maintaining that kind of that sacredness of those relationships. And so I was really lucky and fortunate that a lot of the people who did converge on Like That were able to share some of those stories and continue to be a part of my life and continue to shape and influence kind of the way that I do the work that I do. So I don't really have a lot of like super great gifts. I'm really good though at getting shit done. So I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm not always the funniest, I'm not always the most attractive person, but I will always get shit done. And so that's kind of the gift that I have brought to the work that I do in the city. And that's a thing that, again, that I learned from having a really, really strong family. I don't really know what else I can add to this conversation today, because Karen and Albert and Crystal have added so much. But I just wanted to give you a kind of sense of the kind of work that I do, and just the importance that, even though some, like as Karen had mentioned and Albert had reiterated, that a lot of what I've been able to do is because a lot of people cleared that path with blood and with sweat and with tears, and I wouldn't be able to do the things that I'm able to do without the work of those people. And all that motivates me to do the stuff that I do is because I want to make it better for the next people who are coming up. I want that path to be just a little bit clearer for them. And I want to just try my best to be a really kick-ass auntie, because I had so many kick-ass aunties, and I want to be able to pass that on to other people. So that's who I am. And I really appreciate everyone like taking time to listen to this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Levi. Miigwech. I really appreciate what you shared. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Levi?
Hi, Levi. It's Ray. You talked about blood, tears, and sweat. I just want to say, like, you should give yourself credit, because without you being so deadly, now I can't just pass on those lessons that you've learned. So you're already a deadly auntie, just so you know. And the question I have that came to my head while you were speaking was, how did the 7 grandfather teachings help you on your two-spirit journey?
So in my journey, the 7 teachings have been super important. And they, as you get older, you kind of realize, and you try really hard to figure out when it's appropriate to call on those grandfathers, or that knowledge that was passed in those teachings. For me, one of the biggest things that I had to learn, and one of the biggest things that I had to, the teaching that I struggle the most with constantly, is love. I can do respect. I can be courageous even when it's not necessary. And even when I think I'm being courageous, maybe I should be practicing more humility. But learning how to love, because that's the thing, through colonization and through things like patriarchy and through all of these systems that have been imposed on us, that's the thing that it beat out of us first. Is it really, really tells us not to love, and not to love ourselves, and not to love one another within our communities and within our families. And it really gave us a lot of messed up ideas about what love means. And so love is the one that I struggle with the most, learning to love myself and being able to love the people around me. But also understanding that I have different ways of showing how to love than other people do. And that is that there's no one way we can love. And there's no one way to be courageous, and there's no one way to have respect. There's lots of different things that we have to continually analyze and understand and seek out knowledge from one another that help us understand these things. But we can't do that if we don't have that fundamental basis of loving ourselves to be able to take all of the other necessary steps. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Anyone? Go ahead.
You're a drag queen, right?
Yep.
What's that like? I'm in makeup. I'm a makeup artist, and I sometimes have trouble. But I want to see what it's like for you.
So what it's like to be a drag queen?
Yeah.
Oh, it's the best. Again, the previous question that Ray had asked, one of the things that drag really helped me do is it really taught me courage. When I would walk into a room 20 years ago or 15 years ago, even when I said that us, like the Native queers, we would just kind of hang out at the back of the bar and we would occasionally venture onto the dance floor and stuff. That was really typical of my whole experience. But then being a drag queen, I learned that I can walk into any room in full drag and I'm 7 feet tall and 250 pounds and everyone's going to be staring at me and I got to do something with that. And then I learned through that that I still have that power, whether or not I'm in drag. I still have the ability to to tap into that when I need to. And so that's what drag has really meant to me. It's awesome. It gives me minutes or moments in time where I get to be all the things I was told I wasn't allowed to be. A rock star, a beauty queen. I get to feel really nice. And then also times I can use it and I can get really ugly and really ridiculous and really stupid. So drag is has been a really beautiful outlet for me.
Wonderful. Any more questions for Levi? Okay. So we are moving on to our fifth and final speaker. This is Fallon Simard. So Fallon Simard is an Anishinaabe Métis artist, educator, and policy writer from Couchiching First Nation and Grand Council Treaty Number 3 territory. He is an interdisciplinary artist, research fellow at the Yellowhead Institute, policy analysis at the Chiefs of Ontario, and owner of Contairy Company. His professional appointments enable research into social policy fields such as gender identity, mental health, child welfare, and mortality. The experience in these fields propels Simard to create artwork that directly investigates policy and theory in these areas through video, illustration, and memes. Thurza Cuthand, in a review in a Canadian Art, describes Simard's work as firmly situated within the strong history in Canadian and experimental Indigenous sovereignty and struggle. Simard graduated from OCAD University through the Interdisciplinary Master of Art, Media and Design program. He has exhibited at the Art Gallery in Peterborough, curated for the Queer Art Festival in Toronto, written policy for the Yellowhead Institute at Ryerson University, and participate in Plug in ICA's Summer Institute. So, Fallon, it is totally up to you.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name's Fallon Simard. I'm like Tiffany said in my bio, I'm an Anishinaabe Métis artist from Couchiching First Nation. Yeah, I'm just sort of reflecting and digesting on the information and thinking about what I can share that will help all of you in your work and on the day-to-day. So I think what I'll do is I'll share a bit about who I am as a person and a bit of my personal and lived experience. And then I can share some really helpful hints and some helpful tips for how to make your services better for Two-Spirit and trans youth and communities overall. Yeah, so I'm gonna be 30 in May. I'm a Gemini, and if you really like astrology, I'm a Scorpio moon. And I'm also an artist, and I use he, him pronouns. And my gender identity, like, name is Aries. It's your season. My gender identity, like, name is that I'm a gender non-conforming trans man. So I've been on testosterone for 4 years and also got top surgery 4 years ago as well. And so, yeah, I think I technically really transitioned 4 years ago, but then before that, I was identifying as not non-binary, but I've been gender non-conforming since, like, I was in high school, like a baby. And then once I moved to Toronto, all the cool, like, queer, what Alex Wilson says is that when we think about these urban spaces and all the queer communities in urban spaces, you, like, hope to get to this, like, queer mecca of places. It's just like this queer paradise kind of deal. And it was for me when I first got here, but it also was really confusing because a lot of people brought up all these, like, I was also raised in Fort Francis, Ontario, and like, we lived on the Couchiching, the res for, like, a little bit, but then moved off and moved around. But I've always known I've been a trans man since I was a baby. And I really explicitly just remember wanting to express myself as masculine and express myself as, like, as just a man, as a boy, doing manly things, thinking about all the fun man things I can do. And then because of sort of the internalized racism that's embedded in, like, our communities right now, that sort of manifests as transphobia and homophobia. Albert McLeod has a really good presentation that talks about that, and me and Albert were actually on a panel 3 years ago or so, talking about racism, transphobia, and homophobia. But I say this because prior to colonialism, I think it's important that everybody knows that like, there was just a diversity of gender identities, and that gender identities and sexuality identities are very, very different. Gender having to do with how you express yourself and your expression as a person, and sexuality having to do with what's involved in your, like, sort of sexual preferences or your expressions of your sexuality. And so those things are very different, and having a space to, like, as service providers, thinking through who and how you can meet people, who you want to meet where they're at, and how you want to meet them in terms of, like, their gender and their sexuality. So a lot of young kids nowadays have, like, just an emerging diversity of gender identities and sexuality identities. And it's important to, like, really honor those identities and hold them as, like, very sacred containers, because that is who they are as people. And as a service provider, what you want to do is you want to meet somebody as a whole person and not as a half person. And that includes acknowledging and honoring and giving them the space to express their gender identities and express their genders and their sexualities. Yeah, so I think that's important. I kind of forgot where I was at because each of my trains of thought just kind of kept going one after the other for things that I wanted to share with you that I thought were important. Yeah, so I definitely think as like an Indigenous sort of gender non-conforming trans man, my experience has just been really great, and I think it also would have been also really awesome if I had had the language and the support of people around me, including like my friends and my family, and even some other, or if I had seen and had access to more of the queer trans people that I know now, like Jack Saddleback and a few other Indigenous trans men who are like human rights activists as well. I think I would have been able to come into my my new identity, which I'm very, 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 very happy with. Like a lot earlier, I have a lot of really specific memories of the times where I tried and wanted to express myself as a person, as a manly person, as a man, as a dude, as a guy, and a lot of people were really awful to me, and not to make it all about tragedy or anything, but it was really hard to navigate those areas, and it just sort of made me feel like I couldn't be happy to express who I was, and that nobody wanted to, or that I would suddenly become unlovable or undesirable as a person if I decided to transition by using hormones, or if I decided to get these different surgeries that really really changed my life, I think. Because prior to that, I definitely had a lot of mental health afflictions, definitely lots of anxiety and depression, and a lot of that having to do with just not being able to be happy in who I was, and not being able to express and feel those moments of gender euphoria, and feel like joy was something that people wanted me to have through expressing myself to the fullest that I could. And people really didn't like that, whether it was friends, families, different work colleagues, girlfriends. Yeah, so there's just a lot of really specific moments where I really tried to come out to people and tell them that I wanted to transition, or I wanted to express myself in a certain way. I remember getting sort of my first binder as a young trans person when I was 24, and to be 24 and get a binder is super amazing. It is one of the nicest things that's ever happened with how it changed my entire body, with how I could walk and move through the world, and it just, the person I know that I am inside in my brain and in my body was matched with a physical external expression, and that feeling just really meant a lot to me, and was really joyful for me. Yeah, and then getting my top surgery was really empowering. It was I was so determined to get it, because for getting these kinds of things, or getting access to different medical needs as trans people, there's just a lot of hoops that you have to jump through, and as service providers, it's useful for you to be aware of the different kinds of medications, or the different kinds of legitimate medical equipment that trans and queer and non-binary kids can have, because not all um, not all people like will want to, who are like present as masculine, will want to like medically transition, and that's okay too. And but sometimes they might want to wear a binder, or they might want to like just have different access to different kinds of like equipment that they can use to help them become their fullest selves. And as service providers, being aware of like these different kinds of things, these different kinds of needs and resources that you can make available to young people or to the queer Indigenous community broadly, will be like such a great way to start outreaching. Like if you start thinking about wanting to really reach non-binary communities, or like any other LGBTQIA person, you can really start thinking about like, what are the needs that people don't have in your community? Like, what is really lacking here that we can like deliver? Like, do the queer kids or like the non-binary kids need binders right now? Do they have them? Do we have a manufacturer for those things? But also getting things like you can have like a drag artist come in like Levi, and you can host a drag night, and people can then just have such a great opportunity to just explore and express themselves and be authentic. And yeah, and I think just like other helpful tips infrastructure wise, I'm also happy to like answer any questions like in the middle of this, but helpful tips are to include the use of like gender neutral language every day in your service provision. So that includes using gender neutral pronouns like they, them. So instead of assuming somebody's gender identity, which you should actually never do, especially for young people, because as a service provider, you would hold so much power over somebody, and making that assumption over somebody's gender identity could like cause them a lot of harm, and maybe they wouldn't want to use your service anymore because you assumed their gender identity without asking, or without taking the space to get to know them, or giving them the space to be themselves. So gender neutral language, very important. And then accessibility wise would include having a gender neutral washroom so that people can have their own spot to pee, because that is like such a major barrier when going out places as queer and trans people. Like if you can't go somewhere and go pee comfortably, or even just take a social break in the bathroom without like outing yourself, or without having to like see people who might chase you out of the bathroom even, which has happened to me lots, where I've forcefully get evicted from the washroom. Not a fun experience. So having the gender neutral single stall washroom is very important. Yeah, so gender neutral language, making sure your like signage and sign-in things are appropriate and accurately reflect gender identity properly. So having like a list of options that makes you able to, it just gives you the starting barriers to like, or the starting steps to be able to talk about gender identity, which is really important. And then I think, yeah, I think that's mostly it. Like pronouns, spots to pee, knowing what other gender-based affirming resources you can have, like binders or makeup drives, or bras for trans women, and definitely like lots of makeup. And yeah, and then really thinking about how you can make your own queer mecca in like these towns, right? How do we make these places happen that are safe and make them so that they're not like filled with like alcohol and drugs, which was like my experience, like looking for a queer mecca. But yeah, thinking about how you can make them and making them like age appropriate for young people. So I think that's about all I would have to say. Feel free to ask me any questions if you feel I didn't respond to anything or anything.
Fallon, thank you so much for everything you shared and those tips. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you, Miigwech. Does anyone have anything to ask Fallon?
I do again. Hello. Hi, Fallon. Thank you for sharing. That was very informative and a good refresher for me on a lot of things. But something I would like to ask about, because this is unfortunately still a reality as far as we have come, there are still people who are resistant to learning about anything to do with the queer community, let alone specifically the trans portion of the community. They seem to have a lot of difficulty around pronouns and just understanding the community as a whole. So how would you propose you navigate a conversation with someone like that when you're trying to introduce these kinds of concepts into your workplace? Like, for example, we are, our executive director right now is preparing to have us all have our pronouns as part of our email signature. And if, say, an employee were to oppose that for whatever reason, like how would you handle that?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of really great resources available. There is the Ontario Human Rights Code, which does, which like, I think it's legally or like regulatively enables all workplaces to include and respect gender identity and gender expression. So those two words keep people from experiencing harassment in different ways. So using the Ontario Human Rights Code, that is your literal human right, and as well federally, they have the Canadian Human Rights Act, which also includes gender identity and gender expression. So by them like being a NIMBY or a naysayer, they're like literally not being legal, are lawful, and they are infringing on your human rights, essentially, to, and your workspace's human rights to, or anybody who receives or goes to your workplace or receives a service there would be infringing on your human rights.
So if all else fails, hit him with the law.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. It just like I've done it. I don't know if anybody here works for Chief of Ontario, but I do, and they didn't update their workplace manual for like probably 20 or 30 years for their policies. And then I was still I was like a 27-year-old, like 28-year-old, experiencing a lot of discrimination and like harassment and wrong pronouns and stuff. And then a lot of weird stuff happened in the organization. And then I was able to like get them to update their policy manual. So updating a workplace policy manual to include gender identity and gender expression and sexuality are also really good moves to be more inclusive. But otherwise, like when I used to work at the Native Youth Sexual Health Network for a couple of years, where I also taught a lot about gender identity. And so some of the things you can do is just like host a quick like educational workshop on like pronouns and gender identity and gender expression, and hopefully all the people will learn and they'll attend the workshop. Yeah, I hope that helps.
No, definitely. Miigwech for the knowledge.
Okay.
Okay, so one more chance. If anyone has any questions for any of the speakers that were on panel today, if you have any questions right now is the time to ask it before we wrap up a little bit. Does anyone have any questions at all or comments?
It's just Bruce. I'm a mental health and addictions counselor at DNFC in Dryden, and I just want to thank Tiffany and everyone who presented today on just sharing their stories and sharing their knowledge. Really excellent for me to hear. I really learned a lot today. Thank you very much. Miigwech.
So yeah, I just want to thank everyone that I would say came out, but you didn't really. Well, that leads to two things: coming out as well as being in the present. A little joke there with words. Anyways, thank you everyone so much for your participation, and thank you for everyone that did show up for the event. We do have 2 participation draws, so let me see if I can figure this out. I'm not techie at all.